Mm. Hello, lovelies. Welcome back to the Better Relations Summit. I'm sure you had an amazing time so far. And maybe for some of you, there has been like this question like, what about attachment styles? Maybe you heard about this. We haven't touched upon it yet in our conversations, but today we're having an expert in that field here. And I'm super, super amazed and honored to have Jessica Fern with us here. Welcome, Jessica. Super cool.
Yes,
Yay.
thank you for having me. I'm excited to be
Mm.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you, Jessica, you're just fitting into this summit like the yellow to the egg is like bam, it's like perfect what you're doing in your work. I'm also think that some of you who are watching this also know Jessica from her books that she's been writing. There's a wonderful book that's called Polysecure, where it's about attachment style, trauma, and non-monogamy. There's also the Polysecure handbook. Um, to go deeper into healing these attachment styles and creating more security. And then there's also Polywise, which is a deeper dive into navigating open relationships. And Jessica is a certified clinical trauma professional and also psychotherapist. And in her private practice, she works with individuals, couples, and people in multi-partner relationships. I love that. On shifting their patterns, on deconditioning cultural imprints, insecure attachment styles, and past traumas so they can open up to live the life and the love that they want. So it's like, yeah, it's just so perfect fusing into here. Wonderful.
Mm.
Thank you, Jessica, for the work that you're doing. And thank you for coming and sharing your wisdom around trauma and attachment styles with us here today.
Yeah, and thank you for hosting the summit. I think this is a new way over the past few years that people are getting access to things they wouldn't have access to otherwise through summits like
Mm,
this. So,
yeah, thank you for saying that. Mm.
yeah.
Hi. So, Jessica, I have my first question that I ask everybody. I'm curious to hear your take on this. So, why do you think in modern times is it so difficult for so many to have the relationship they desire and to maintain relationships, like having more longer and lasting relationships?
Well, what a great question. I think there's a lot of challenges to having the relationships we want. I think we're disconnected from community and we're disconnected from nature and we're put into these kind of the idea of the nuclear family, right? And living more individually. At least here, I live in the United States, and this sets us up to put a lot of weight on one relationship, the romantic partnership. And we're looking to get all of these needs met by one person that we historically would have gotten met by many people. So there's pressure on the relationship to be what it might not even be able to be, for one. And then many of us don't have a relational education. We don't learn how to listen, how to speak clearly from our needs and our wants, how to be in touch with ourselves, how to really care for others around us, typically, especially in the education system that I grew up in. We didn't learn any relational skills. So we're taught you got to get into a romantic relationship. That's one of the most important things to have, but there's no training or skills to get there. And
Mm.
we really don't have, we also hold up like the romantic ideal of falling in love as the pinnacle. And yes, that's a beautiful initial phase of relationship, but we don't realize the work and the effort it takes to maintain a healthy relationship.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. It's always once the first glow fades away, that is where the work comes in, right? And as you said, that there is like this tool set absolutely missing in order to make it happen. And then there's a lot of conditioning around it. I love that you're bringing up also this aspect about community. We're no longer in tribe, and then we have like this one person mostly, and we put everything on one person, right? So
Mhm.
it's like a lot of pressure that comes up in that. Um,
Yeah.
um, what would be like some tools that you would that you would give to somebody if they want to manage in this jungle of relating?
Yeah, initially it is being in touch with themselves. So creating
Mm,
that secure attachment to self, knowing how to tune into where am I right now within myself? How am I feeling? What do I like? What do I don't like? What are my preferences? What are my needs? And then being able to communicate that simply and clearly. There's
mm,
usually a lot of layers added on to our communication that get us in trouble with our partners, right?
mhm,
So, after knowing oneself, then how to communicate would be the other skill. How
mhm,
to attune to our partners, how to be connected but differentiated. This is an advanced skill, I think, of can I
mhm,
allow my partner, differentiation would be, can I allow my partner to be uncomfortable and I don't have to
mhm,
take on that discomfort?
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. And may be disappointed at me even, and I can allow that and be loving and kind and how to support them in that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, for me, this has been a big skill to master my personal relationships to really differentiate and not go again into an avoidance strategy of like, okay, I'm gonna leave this relationship because I don't
Yeah.
want to deal with that, right? These kind of things that come up. So um, can you share more about like how the different what are the different attachment styles? Let's start here for those who have never heard about these
Yes.
things.
Yeah. So the attachment theory was started by John Bowlby in the 1960s, and there's been tons of research that's gone along with it, over the last decades. And what they found is we tend to have four attachment styles. One is secure. So if our caregivers, our parents are able to meet enough of our needs, not all of them, this isn't about perfect parenting, but enough of the attachment needs of not just physical safety and physical needs, but emotional, psychological needs that we need to develop in a healthy way around being attuned to having adults that are kind and responsive to our needs, right? And available, readily available, and protective of us. So when we get enough of that, then we feel safe and secure with the people around us. We feel safe and secure within ourselves. And then we feel safe and secure to explore the world, right? And there's an irony there, a paradox that the more of our attachment needs are met, the more we are able to actually be autonomous and independent as we grow up.
Mm, mm,
Yeah. But more than half of the time, we don't get those attachment needs met. And then there's the insecure attachment styles. So you just named one. There's the avoidant dismissive, which tends to withdraw back, still wants to be in relationship, but keep people at arm's length. Or if there's discomfort or conflict, I'm going to pull back. I might shut down. Usually, someone in that attachment style doesn't have they're not truly connected to themselves and what's really going on and have trouble articulate what's going on. And they have learned for good reason they can't really rely on people. They have to be more self-reliant.
mm,
The other end of that, the opposite sort of, is the anxious, preoccupied attachment style, where someone is very focused on their partner. They're not as focused on themselves, they're more focused outwardly on the other. And there's this hypervigilance of, are you okay? Am I okay? Oh, what did that mean? Does that mean you love me? Oh, I have a great night with you now, but am I going to have it again? There's all this anxiousness and preoccupation that's there. And then there's a disorganized or fearful withdrawn style that vacillates between the two. And that's usually when someone has a more overt trauma history.
yeah.
Yeah. So that's a
Um,
general broad swoop.
yeah, thank you for sharing that. You said like the so I'm gonna repeat those: the
Yeah.
secure one, the insecure, anxious, dismissive one. Then on the other spectrum, we have the anxious, preoccupied one, and then we have the disorganized one. And you mentioned with the disorganized in particular that these are usually people with trauma history.
Yeah.
So my question here is now: is everybody who has a trauma? having disorganized attachment styles, or can I also, without having a trauma, having a disorganized attachment style? How are these two things related?
Yeah, it's a great question. So not everyone that has trauma will necessarily have a disorganized attachment style, but most likely they will have some version of an insecure attachment style.
Mm.
And the beautiful thing is that, attachment styles come from our experience, they were learned, and so we can heal them. So we can have a very disorganized attachment style and actually move into a secure style, or any of the other insecure can become secure as we heal our trauma history. Yes. And
Yeah.
so there was a second part to your question.
Um, like if everybody is disorganized, or exactly, and if people can also be having disorganized attachment styles without having a trauma history.
I think they can, people that, and then it's how do we define trauma? So
Mm.
people that might identify or be diagnosed as neurodivergent. They can have a disorganized attachment style that might not be relational trauma, but it's nervous system trauma, that the
Mm.
sensory integration that I'm supposed to have in a certain way isn't happening, right? Or aspects of the world and the environment are more difficult because of something like neurodivergence.
Mm.
That wasn't because of the relational experience I necessarily had with my caregivers. So there
Mm.
can be other things like accidents or tragedies that happen in one's life. I also think being marginalized. So living in societies or cultures where who you are told or taught isn't okay
Mm.
because of some feature of yourself or some orientation of yourself. That is traumatizing as well, but it wasn't necessarily, that your parents weren't showing up for you in the way that you need.
Mm. Yeah. Oof.
Right. There's many ways, right?
There's
Right.
it's many ways, and I mean, I want to highlight that this is a very complex topic, right? Because as
Yeah.
you said, it starts like where we're defining trauma, and I would go as far as that we all, in some sort of way, have experienced trauma, as in
Yeah.
being left alone with too much that was too fast, and then we could not regulate in that moment back. So this does not necessarily be like a super bad thing that happened, a tragedy or something. And then these things, um, especially in these moments, like for me, I've had a birth trauma where I was left alone, and this imprinted me. Like I was not able to swallow the milk because my tongue was grown to my gum with a little skin, and then they took me to helicopter, and like I couldn't drink and get food for a long time, and this imprinted me, and of course it also imprinted my attachment style. So because there was an absence of my need of safety that was not fulfilled, right? So this is like very
Yeah.
complex how these are feeding together. um
Yes.
so
That's a great
yeah.
example of where medical trauma that's no one's fault really
Mhm.
can create an insecure attachment style because of the way it was dealt with. Yeah.
Exactly. So what can people do? Like how to find out about these attachment styles and how they're
Mm.
impacting us in relating?
Yes. So there's many tests and quizzes people can take online. In my book, Polysecure, I go through a bunch of questions that people can self-identify, how they're relating in their relationships. Um, and what I see is some people tend to really be one style, but often we have a few different styles. Like we might be very secure with certain people, and then in this one relationship, we're more anxious. And then over time in that relationship, we might become more avoidant. So it's not a static thing. Our styles actually can change, and as we've said, they can heal. So first, just learning about your style is great. Please be careful not to pathologize yourself. It's not about parent blaming or not to essentialize your partner. And this is the one style, this is how they are, as if
Mhm.
it's all of them. And then there are resources out there in general, but my book Polysecure goes into ways to heal, and especially the workbook, lots of questions and exercises to be in touch with your history and how to work on regaining that secure attachment with self and with another.
Yeah, beautiful. Mm. And like, have you can you say like these attachment styles, right? How are they like? If I'm in one attachment style, I see many times in the people that I work with or that we're working with in BliXX that there is some sort of like special attraction between there's a little bit of an avoidant attachment style, and then we have this ancient attachment style. So they're like kind of like having some sort of attraction in between.
Yeah.
And can you speak more about this and give some more examples around that? I would love to hear from you.
It's a very classic pairing, right? Or some people call it the distancer and the pursuer. And we have the
Mhm,
anxious style that's like, coming and sort of clinging on to someone who has more of an avoidant style, and that just makes them withdraw even further, right? But what's really interesting is it sometimes flips. So you might have this person who's more anxious and pursues or demands, right? I need attention, or where are you? What's happening? I want to process. And this person who withdraws. And then if they eventually withdraw, this person starts to feel anxious and will show
mhm,
signs of that. But yeah, it's kind of an archetypal pairing and pattern of an avoidance style with the more anxious style. And I think part of it is because it's compatible in that they're each doing what the other one can't,
mhm,
right? And they're each needing what the other one does do.
mhm,
So the person who's in the anxious style, there's gifts to these styles too. They're more relationally intelligent, so to speak. They're more relationally tuned in. They're better able to do connection, right? The avoidance style kind of needs those skills. So they're drawn to the person that has it. Oh, wow, you have all these emotions over here that you're able to express. I need to learn that, right? Whether this is conscious or not. The avoidance style, they're really good at autonomy. They're good at compartmentalization. They're good at like getting tasks done, kind of left hemisphere things of the world, and being able to be more independent, which this person over here is like, oh, I need some of those skills because I tend to lose myself in relationship. It'd
mhm,
be nice to be more autonomous like you. Yeah. So I
mhm,
think that's a part of it too, is we're looking to the other and even admiring, again, whether it's conscious or not, the skills that they have.
mhm. Yeah, beautiful. But usually from my experience, when I was looping in this very strong being, yeah, I was very disorganized, I would say, my attachment style, from being avoidant to being very clinging and like, oh my God. And this it came always came out like this power dynamic, a little bit, this
Yeah.
power play. And I would always attract people and end up in like who is haunting who. It was a little bit like a predator prey kind of like mm, mm, mm. So if people find themselves in dynamics like that, where these two attachment styles are fueling each other, and instead of like supporting the one to come back into secure, like even making this bigger, what are things that you're recommending for people looping in that dynamic?
Yeah. So I think you're bringing a good point. It's making me think of there's sort of degrees of this kind of dynamic, right? So we can have this dynamic where it's kind of like mild to medium to
Mhm,
extreme. And if it's in that extreme zone and now it's turning into real toxicity and dysfunction and we're traumatizing each other, we're in unhealthy power dynamics, like you're saying, we might need to leave the relationship actually to heal. Or that's in that sort of more extreme version, there needs to be a lot more support and intervention where
mm,
people are sort of getting, professional support, different kinds of professional support to work on being able to regulate their own nervous systems and not go into these dysregulated states and then mistreat each other, and actually be in control enough of your own behaviors that you're not harming those that you actually love, right? Or at this higher level, there's the association is love is dangerous. I want love, but it's also dangerous. And then we act out that danger with our loved ones, and it really becomes a tragedy. So you got to de-escalate down into more of the, mild to medium, where we have these dynamics, but we can work on them. They're not traumatizing us. They're not toxic and abusive, right? And then at those levels, getting therapy, right? Doing other types of coaching, reading a book, listening to an audio program that can support you in learning, what about me do I need to heal, right? Or evolve that's participating in this dynamic? And what together do we need to do differently?
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing and also like red flagging certain dynamics. And I know from my own experience that these relationships usually always ended
Yeah,
when it
right.
was going to an extreme, because it's some I think that we all can heal, but I also think when we're fueling each other's and bring out like really these worst aspects in this attachment style, that sometimes it's better to separate and to do their own work and then
Yes.
maybe come back together or not. Because like from my experience, very often I had a hard time like to move back on, because these patterns and these dynamics were so ingrained. And then through the work with conscious kink, I could repattern these trauma imprints, go really deep into them, seeing that, oh, okay, when there is love, I feel actually endangered. As you said, this is the thing that I wanted the most, but then I was always kind of fighting it. And when I
Yeah.
understood that and could like really feel that in my body and release it in my body, I could shift the pattern and settle into more um, healthy ways of relating. And for sure, what has helped me a lot is that I'm now with a person who is mostly securely attaching. So this is also something that is still helping me when I find myself being like, okay, I wanna flee this relationship. This is too much. Yeah, I'm in my avoidance. And he's like, no, you're here now, and this is safe, right? So this is like also very helpful. Is there anything that you can um share as a practice or like as an input for people to help them to more like to anchor deeper in secure attaching?
Yeah. I mean, what your need, there's like a foundational practice I'll do with people, and it sounds so simple, but it feels really powerful if you actually practice it, is to tell your nervous system, like do deep breathing and just say, in this moment, I am safe.
Mm.
I might not always have been safe, but in this moment, I am safe. And of course, you need to do this in a room or your car that's parked where you are actually safe in that moment. Right. But what you're describing with the disorganized pattern is that the nervous system has to come back into balance. And often we need things like trauma therapy or psychedelic assisted therapy or conscious kink. These are all, there's many different modalities to help heal those traumas, but really just settling into the body and realizing I am safe right now
Mm.
is a big part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Mm. Mm. Ah, so so good to hear that. And yeah, as you said, it's like it sounds so simple.
It's
um,
very simple and yet
yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Mm. Very
But
powerful. And as you said before in the beginning, also like this ability to be really kind with oneself, right? You already spoke into that, this like compassionate self, and being like, okay, I'm like making little steps.
yes,
Mm.
exactly. I mean, right. So now what you're reminding me of is that when we have a trauma history or insecure attachment styles, we usually have a very fierce inner critic. And there's also usually shame. And so that I think is sort of a threshold we need to get through by healing those parts. So I do a lot of inner parts work and
Mm.
looking at how do we transform? We don't get rid of the inner critic, but how do I transform that inner critic? How do I work with my shame and even able to be loving and kind with my shame so that I'm not living with shame in the driver's seat of my life and relationships?
Mm.
So that's a really important experience to have as well. It's very hard to be loving to ourselves, loving in relationships, if we have this fierce inner critic and this really debilitating shame that keeps taking over.
Absolutely. Yes. Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I I resonate with that also, with this fierce inner critic, and to be really like dominating, starting to dominate that inner critic, right? And be like, stop it now. It's like, okay, then now don't give you the domination of the show, because mostly we all know where this leads
Right.
when this inner
Exactly.
critic goes, right? So like,
Yeah.
okay, now myself stays anchored, and I'm gonna be able to dominate that one. Yes, absolutely. Beautiful. And I see that we have talked before a little bit, and you wanted to share more about a nested model that you have of attachment and trauma. Yes,
Yeah.
I would
This
love to. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, this was something I came up with for Polysecure, that I was realizing that most of the literature, not all, but most of the literature tend to talk about our individual attachment styles and then the relational trauma that we went through that sort of created that style. And while that's true, it's partial, it's incomplete. And I saw that, oh, attachment and trauma happen on multiple levels. So this nested model has the self in the middle, and then one level out is relationships. And then the
Mm,
next level out is our home environment, which
mm,
includes the physical environment as well as the people that are in our home. Then it's community and culture. So the places that we go outside of our home on a regular basis: school, spiritual, religious centers, work, all of those kind of things, society that we're in, and then the global level. And so these are distinct levels, but they're nested because they're all connected. We can't actually separate them completely. And so what I see is that trauma can happen, or attachment ruptures can happen at any of these levels. And if we don't acknowledge the levels beyond the self and the relationship, right, we're missing something in these other levels. So racism is a big issue in the United States. And what tends to happen is we don't acknowledge that there's an attachment trauma at the societal and cultural levels around racism. And instead, the individual level just gets blamed,
mm,
right?
yeah.
So instead of conflating problems into the individual, right, we need to expand it out. The beautiful thing is that all these levels can have trauma and ruptures, but they also can all have healing.
Mm,
That at these different levels, we can find healing within ourselves, that maybe we didn't have access to at a different level.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah, beautiful. And how
So,
do you tackle these levels for healing?
yeah. So it depends on the level, right?
Mm,
So I think an example can be someone who comes out as queer, and maybe they feel like this is their at the self level, right? This is who I am. I even am proud of it. It just is who I am, how I am. But there's relational trauma that maybe a family member disowns them for being queer. Well,
mm,
often, and that's very painful, right? Well, many people who are queer find queer community outside of the home and can find healing, even on online communities, in-person communities, where who they are is absolutely accepted and celebrated and embraced, right? Or in the United States, at the societal level, when queer people were given rights to same-sex marriages, that did a lot. It's not the only thing that needs to happen, but to have legal rights acknowledged
mm,
for who you are can really offer a certain level of healing within the self, because you don't feel like, oh, the world isn't shunning me in the same way as it was before. So it's really identifying, which levels am I struggling with, and where can I look to different levels for certain kinds of support and certain kinds of healing.
mm. Beautiful, yeah. Um, I love this like separating it into these different levels and looking it from different lenses and different
Exactly.
perspectives. Is like really, really beautiful. What I struggle a little bit, I have a question is like this, um, if if the rupture, as you said, is happening on a more global or societal level, am I then, if this is affecting me, responsible for the society or like the overall global thing, for it to change? Like when you brought like this example now with this queer person, and then same sex marriages were there as a
Right.
shift, like how can I as an individual impact these levels if the rupture is there?
Impact is the right word, right? Because as an individual, we actually cannot take on the responsibility of the
Mm,
collective. And as an individual, I cannot completely change the collective. It's not my, like one person can't change what the collective has created, but we can impact it. And that can look so many different ways. So just asking oneself, what are the ways I can make a difference given my life, my resources, the
mm,
realities of what I'm embedded in? So, depending on where you live in the world, you might not be able to be out as a queer person. But if you can be out and you're safe, that makes a big difference to keep showing, this is okay, this is who we are, to do advocacy, to even donate to organizations that are doing advocacy work if you yourself couldn't be out. Right? There's many different
mm,
ways we can assess. Similar, I mean, the environmental realities of our planet are concerning for some people, right? And at the individual level, we go, well, what can I do? And maybe it's getting an electric car if that's an option. Maybe it's the way that we don't just always buy a new product right away. If something breaks, we buy something that's used. There could be these small ways to feel like I can't tackle all of this, but I can do what I can to make an impact.
mm.
So
Yeah,
it's
beautiful.
really seeing that even if it's small, we have power to do something that's in alignment with our values.
Mm, yes,
Yeah.
beautiful. This is what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, good, good. Good. I
No,
also
like,
will add too, I think the global level can, to me, that also, the spiritual level could probably be its own, but I
mm,
could talk about the global as a spiritual level as well. And when we connect with the earth or we do certain shamanic practices or
mm,
spiritual practices that can help us feel more connected to something like
mm,
universal love, that also
mm,
can help a
yeah.
lot too. Yeah.
For sure, and I mean, developing a secure attachment to this connection, right? I think this is so crucial, especially in our times, to connect to Earth and to learn to trust that there is something that is bigger than ourselves. For me, like all this level has helped a lot,
Yeah.
for my overall healing to feel more secure and safe within myself and trust that I'm provided for and all of that things, instead of like, oh my god, we're gonna die, oxygen is gonna run out.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Jessica, for sharing all these beautiful insights, from talking from what are the different trauma styles and attachment styles, and how they impacting us, and how this plays together with like trauma, and how this can come up in relationships, creating shame, creating power dynamics to your nested model. I really enjoyed this conversation. I have one last question for you before we head into how people can find out more about you. From your practice, how much do you think it's important for people, whether to know what is their attachment style, but also to know like how much this is rooted really in trauma? How much is this important for healing, for being able to relate fully, to know all of that?
Yeah, I think it is very important. I think it's important to identify these as patterns, as tendencies, as the byproduct of our trauma, right? And not to, like I said earlier, not to essentialize ourselves and totalize
Mm,
ourselves or pathologize ourselves. So ideally, learning about your trauma history, owning your trauma history, so to speak, learning about your attachment style, this should be helpful, not pathologizing,
Yeah.
right? It should give you insight. Oh, okay, that's my tendency. This explains it. And so there's a path forward to heal it. Yeah, so I think thinking of it as an awareness tool that can be really supportive in the healing process.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for emphasizing this.
Yes,
I'm totally with you that it's, of course, it's important. This is why we're doing this summit,
right.
right?
Exactly.
Um, to raise awareness around that, but also I'm grateful that you're saying that to anchor that this is not like pathologizing, because I know for some it can be like, oh my God, now I have to know everything, and where's this coming from, and where's that coming from, and then we end up being like so much over analyzing and constantly like reflecting on our patterns, and again feeding this self-sabotage, this critique that is
Exactly.
like so we keep
Right.
on looping in the same spiral, right? This is why I wanted to highlight this before we're
Good.
finishing.
I'm
Yeah.
glad you did. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. Very good. So, Jessica, how can people find out more about you? You mentioned your
Um,
book a couple of times that I really recommend reading. It's called Polysecure. And if you're more interested in relating, open relating, it's Polywise. So,
mhm.
yeah, any
Yeah.
other ways that they can get in touch with you?
My website is jessicafern.com. That's the simplest way to be in touch with me or sign up and, I announce things that are going on or talks that I've done. Yeah.
Beautiful. Yes,
Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you so much for being here,
Thank you.
Jessica.
Yeah. Thank you for everyone who took the time to listen.
Yes, thank you everybody for listening and tuning into today's episode about attachment, trauma, and our ability to relate. I really warmly invite you to come to our closing ceremony, be there live together with me, and go with me through a relational release ritual, and also be part of the lucky draw for those who are live there. So I see you there at the end of the summit. I'm looking forward to it. And thank you.